The Reserve Bank gets set for an overhaul after a major review finds some serious challenges at the central bank. The competition regulator blocks Qantas's bid for a fly-in, fly-out challenger, and Elon Musk says he's about to cut the price of Teslas again. It's Friday, the 21st of April, 2023. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and Sean Aylmer is away today. He's back tomorrow, so that means good morning, Adam Lang.
Good morning, Michael.
Adam, after the show, we have an interview with a familiar name, I suspect, Canna Campbell, who is a financial planner and the founder of Sugar Mama TV, the financial literacy platform, but also the co-host of our sister podcast, How Do They Afford That? It's a really interesting, very serious chat about superannuation and about women in particular and superannuation and the shocking difference between men and their super balances when they retire and women when they retire, and basically what needs to be done to close that gap. So it's a fantastic conversation, well worth sticking around for. It's coming up a little bit later on. But Adam, we've got some big stories to discuss, and I'm keen to hear your take on a few of these ones, because the main story is one that's been kind of floating around for a while, and yesterday it all really came to a head because the Reserve Bank is set for a sweeping overhaul of its operations, at least at the very top level, with the establishment of two boards. Treasurer Jim Chalmers yesterday agreed to all 51 recommendations in principle contained in the independent review of the Reserve Bank of Australia, the first external review of the central bank and the operation of monetary policy, that includes obviously interest rate decisions, in 4 decades.
That's right, Michael. And 51 recommendations, that's a lot. The recommendations are grouped into 5 themes around the monetary policy framework, monetary policy decision-making and accountability, an open and dynamic RBA, better corporate governance, and ensuring the bank leadership drives institutional and cultural change. So you'd have to say that is fairly broad sweeping. The reviewers recommended the establishment of a separate monetary policy board and a governance board to ensure decision-making and governance arrangements are as effective as they can be. It's recommended putting more experts on the monetary policy board, which is the one setting interest rates, that can better challenge the governor. It also wants to cut the number of board meetings to 8 per year and ensure mandatory news conferences after each decision. And while the 2 to 3% target for inflation stays, the review recommends tightening up wording around what the RBA actually means.
That's interesting that they would look to cut the number of board meetings to 8. So that would bring us into line with the US, the Federal Reserve, and the prospect of mandatory news conferences after each decision. I think for a podcast like Fear and Greed, that's pretty enticing.
Michael, do you think there's a coincidence there? Now, as you know, I don't believe in coincidences, so I'd have to say there's a certain pattern. But geez, what a sport it's going to be when those decisions come out.
Oh, it certainly will be. And it will mean that there'll be kind of less attempting to interpret the wording of the statement, won't there? Because and people poring over the words of statements from the Reserve Bank, because there will be the media conference at which the governor and other experts, I would imagine, can be grilled over the decision. So very interesting to see this being included in those recommendations. The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, said the government would work with the coalition to introduce legislation to reinforce the independence of the RBA when it comes to monetary policy, and legislation would strengthen the central bank's mandate and clarify the, quote, dual objectives of price stability and full employment. Fairly kind of wide-ranging report, as you said before, Adam. Do you think it was critical of the Reserve Bank?
Michael, it gave some pretty blunt commentary. It said the composition of the current RBA board, which is mostly made up of business people rather than monetary policy experts, wasn't good enough. That's pretty serious. It talked about the bank being at risk of groupthink because of a culture that concentrates decision-making in a handful of senior leaders and a failure to be more open to external views. And it was also critical of senior management not allowing or acting on feedback from within the bank. So, yeah, I think so. I think that's pretty critical.
Yeah, it does sound quite critical. What did Governor Philip Lowe say in response?
I think this is really interesting. He welcomed it and broadly agreed with the recommendations. He said 2 boards was a good idea. He also said he didn't feel slighted by the report, adding that he won't pitch to be reappointed as governor when his term finishes in September, but he's happy to stay on. He will do his best to implement the RBA review's changes, but his future is up to the federal government.
Yeah, it's a big story, isn't it? And it's one that we've known is coming for a while because this review has been talked about a great deal, but it's fascinating now to see the recommendations.
Michael, if there's 8 decisions, say next year, and the very first of the media conferences come out, can you imagine the queue to attend those and who gets their hand up for the first question?
Oh, that would be very exciting, wouldn't it? And actually, that would be the ultimate way of deciding the pecking order in Australian business journalism, wouldn't it? Whoever gets chosen first.
True. The honour.
That's right. Let's move on now. We'll check local markets. The S&P ASX 200 finished the day down yesterday just a touch to 7,362 points. The big miners fell back. BHP down 2.5%. Rio Tinto down 2.4%. Fortescue Metals lower as well. In contrast, the big banks did well, led by Commonwealth Bank, up nearly 2%, back above $100 a share, Adam.
There was a fair bit of corporate news around too, Michael. Logistics giant Brambles has lifted its full-year profit forecast after a solid March quarter. Its share price rose 0.3%.
Oh, hang on 1 second. The difference between when you are doing the show with me, Adam, and Sean doing the show is that Sean cannot resist the opportunity whenever Brambles comes up that he loves talking about
pallets,
about their pallets because and just going on about how many hundreds of millions of pallets Brambles currently has out in the worldwide kind of economy. And so with Sean obviously absent today, I feel the need to tell you an interesting fact about Brambles and its pallets.
Keeping the love of pallets alive.
That's right. And this is courtesy of the Financial Review that last year there was talk about whether Brambles was going to invest a great deal of money in plastic pallets for Costco. And then they decided not to. But the reason that Costco wanted to move to plastic pallets, right, is because of the high number of injuries from splinters to staff and customers. Can you believe that?
What about gloves?
That seems like that's a fairly cost-effective way of fixing the problem. Adam Ideas Man Lang.
Thank you.
Or Adam Gloves Lang.
I like gloves.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to keep on workshopping your nickname, but please, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just had to share that interesting pallet fact. Please go on.
We all thank you, Michael. Oil and gas explorer Santos lowered its production by 15% in its March quarter results. Its share price fell 0.4%. Silk Laser Australia has allowed Wesfarmers to conduct due diligence as part of a possible takeover after making a $169 million cash offer for the laser clinic chain. Its share price jumped 24%. Not bad.
Are you intimately familiar with the operations of the Silk Laser clinic?
Only from the desktop terminal, Michael. Never visited a venue myself.
I don't believe you. You look like someone who takes great care of yourself in that way, Adam. What's happening on international markets?
Away from my grooming regime, there seems to be a bit more fear and a little less greed in global markets at the moment, with a sell-off across commodities over the past 36 hours. Oil, gas and copper prices all fell, while gold, considered a safe haven, rose. Cryptocurrencies have also come off a bit, with Bitcoin back down to US $29,000 a unit. The Aussie dollar is trading around 67.2 US cents.
All right, there is a fair bit to cover today. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Adam, the competition regulator has blocked Qantas's proposed acquisition of regional airline Alliance, worried that the competition in the fly-in, fly-out market in Western Australia and Queensland will lessen.
The ACCC said Alliance is an important competitor to Qantas, and the removal of Alliance is likely to substantially lessen competition. That could mean higher prices and reduced service quality. The ACCC said that flying workers in the resource sector to and from their work sites is an essential service, so it is critical that competition in this market is protected. Qantas wasn't happy about it, saying it remained quote, confident the acquisition would not substantially lessen competition, end of quote. Qantas has requested a meeting with the competition regulator to understand its decision.
Adam, Rio Tinto's Australian iron ore division has made its best ever start to a year with a 16% surge in export volumes. That's huge. But the strong performance in iron ore was partially offset by a downgrade to copper production guidance on the back of technical problems at Rio's American and Chilean copper mines.
Michael, these are vast volumes, and according to the Financial Review, the first 3 months of the year are typically the weakest for Australian miners because weather tends to disrupt exports. But if Rio were to continue exporting at the rate achieved over the past 3 months, it would hit the top of its guidance range for exports. Rio has promised to ship between 320 million and 335 million tonnes from WA in 2023.
I struggle to get my head around just the sheer scale of that.
Absolutely.
That is extraordinarily huge.
And you imagine the capital investment, the people, the safety. This is a complex and huge operation.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable. Now, Adam, this is an interesting one. Bank of Queensland says it faces a risk of penalties, sanctions, or other enforcement action relating to ongoing regulatory reviews of its risk culture and anti-money laundering compliance.
That's right, Michael. The regional bank released its half-year result yesterday, which showed a slight fall in net profit, but the bottom line tumbled after Bank of Queensland booked a $200 million goodwill impairment and a $42 million after-tax provision for costs relating to a new integrated risk program. The bank cut its dividend and said reviews conducted with regulators had revealed the bank required a material uplift in its operational resilience, risk culture and governance, and Bank of Queensland's anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing program and compliance. What a list of things to do.
Yes, it's quite something. And as soon as you look at anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing program and compliance, that's a meaty kind of topic, isn't it?
Oh yeah, just this, it smells of villainy.
Yeah, it does. And that's why obviously they're all so careful and cautious around all of this. Adam, Origin Energy says it will commit $600 million in the first stage development of a large-scale battery at its Eraring power station. Construction and supply of the battery is set to commence within weeks, and stage one is going to include the construction of a 460 megawatt battery. I still love saying that. Gigawatts and megawatts. They're just a fun word to say, aren't they? 460 megawatt battery storage system with a dispatch duration of 2 hours.
Tech, green energy, big scale, what's not to like? The battery is set to come online in the final quarter of the 2025 calendar year. Origin Energy added that the company has the option to increase the battery from 460 to 700 megawatt and 4 hours dispatch duration in the future. Chief Executive Frank Calabria said he was pleased to make this significant capital investment in Origin's first major battery project to support the growth in renewable energy.
And I suppose on kind of similar lines, Adam, Andrew Forrest and critical minerals producer IGO Limited want to construct a processing plant that would mix nickel, cobalt, and manganese. That's another fun word to say, manganese, to make a precursor material for the cathodes in modern batteries. So that kind of includes the batteries that power electric vehicles, which should, in theory, make the Albanese government pretty happy because it's pushing for Australia to own more of the global battery manufacturing value chain.
Michael, manganese is not a language from Japanese comics? That was terrible.
That was absolutely awful, but it's a joke. It's a joke that only Adam Gloves Lang could make. I don't know whether Gloves is going to stick.
No, and I think we'll be editing that line out. Anyway, IGO and Dr. Forrest's private company Wailu Metals have been working together to build downstream nickel processing for 14 months, and on Friday said they would lease 30 hectares of vacant land in the south of Perth. The processing plant is expected to turn the nickel that IGO and Wailu will mine into nickel sulfate crystals for battery manufacturers. That's something BHP has been doing since 2021, But Wailu and IGO want to go further by, quote, integrating a downstream nickel refinery with a plant producing high-value nickel-dominant precursor cathode active material, end of quote. Doesn't that just roll off the tongue?
Oh, just fluently. It's quite extraordinary. And you say it so well.
Just got through it. It does get a bit technical for we mere mortals, but it pushes Australian manufacturing up the value chain, and that's a great thing.
Thank you for summarising it there at the end, because it did get a little bit kind of convoluted and confusing in the middle. Not that I was ever going to criticise you.
Nickel dominant precursor cathode active material.
Can we just say manganese a few more times, because that is a fun word.
Yeah, manganese is good.
Manganese. Now, international news. Tesla boss Elon Musk. We seem to mention him an awful lot, don't we?
Well, he does draw it.
I mean, he's the one that keeps on kind of making headlines. He's doubled down on the price war that he started at the end of last year, saying that Tesla would prioritise sales growth in electric vehicles ahead of profit in a weak economy.
Musk said it's better to shift a large number of cars at lower margin and harvest that margin in the future. He said that although the economy remained uncertain, the EV makers' orders exceeded production. Tesla posted its lowest quarterly margins in 2 years during the March quarter as it managed aggressive price cuts. The electric vehicle maker has slashed prices 6 times in the United States, as well as in China and other markets since late last year. Let's see if they come out here in Australia.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Now, how's this for a strike, Adam? More than 155,000 federal workers in Canada walked off the job after wage talks with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government failed. The labour disruption is expected to impede government functions really quite broadly, including the release of economic data from Statistics Canada, which I know would definitely upset you. It will interrupt kind of passports and immigration applications and even tax filings.
The disruption from this is really significant, and the stakes are high for the Prime Minister, whose government has increased the size of the public service by more than a third since being elected in 2015. It's all about pay, with many workers hoping to recoup purchasing power they lost during the recent period of high inflation. PSAC, the largest federal civil service union in Canada, has been seeking a 13.5% rise over 3 years for Treasury Board employees.
Be honest, Adam, how much did it hurt you to say PSAC just then and not Public Service Alliance of Canada?
It didn't feel right.
You sounded profoundly uncomfortable just then.
I was.
And obviously you are, for anyone who is not familiar with one of your, I was going to say one of your quirks, but that's probably unfair. You're almost violently allergic to any form of acronym or initialism or anything along those lines. And so for me, hearing you say PSAC just then, you squirmed a little bit. And
all right, Michael. So what is it? Let me do it again.
No, I want it to stay on the record that you used an initialism, PSAC, and I enjoyed how uncomfortable you sounded.
I won't let it happen again.
You better not. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has become the 4th member of his family to run for the Democrat presidential nomination, launching his campaign it would be launched in Boston.
Now, Michael, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the nephew of assassinated former President John F. Kennedy and the son of Bobby, shot on the campaign trail in 1968. He spoke for almost 2 hours before a 1,000-strong audience, many of whom had travelled interstate to hear the anti-vaccine campaigner and environmental lawyer call for a unity in a divided nation. Another uncle, Teddy, ran for nomination in 1980. And the pitch of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., in his words, quote, "During this campaign and during my administration, my objective will be to make as many Americans as possible forget that they are Republicans or Democrats and remember that they are Americans." End of quote. Very Kennedy-esque quote there.
Yeah, it certainly is, isn't it? And it's you know what this does? It adds just a little bit more theatre into US politics, because I feel like that's what it needs. There just isn't enough.
Right. Trump's not enough.
No, Trump is never enough. We need a Kennedy in there as well.
The carnival must grow.
That's right. Now, Adam, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview with today, Qantas Campbell, financial planner, founder of Sugar Mama TV, co-host of our sister podcast, How Do They Afford That? All about superannuation. It is well worth a listen. It is a really serious, very important topic, and it is coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Adam. And we get to do this again tomorrow with Sean in the mix as well for the weekend edition. Are you looking forward to that?
I always do. There's some anticipation and a fair amount of trepidation as well, because I know my judgments can never leave everyone happy.
No. And it gets quite competitive. It can get a bit, would you say aggressive at times?
Up tempo, perhaps.
Yeah, that's not bad. Adam, before we go, actually, we need to mention we have a Mia for today.
Oh, this is great.
Most enthusiastic advocate, MEA, Mia. So that is someone who is a big supporter and a big fan of Fear and Greed and tells people about Fear and Greed. And this one is a gentleman by the name of Danuka, and he wrote to us via our website, fearandgreed.com.au. And he said, I listen to Fear and Greed every morning, occasionally on the weekend. Can I just say your podcast is awesome, to the point, objective, with lots of banter, just the way to do it. This is the important part, Adam. He said, I picked up something from yesterday's podcast that I figured I'll write to you about. When Michael said he was trying to figure out the potential fine that Commonwealth Bank would have to pay for underpaying staff, he indicated that the calculator on his phone returned an error. Because, of course, I was talking about the fact that if there was 7,204 employees at Commonwealth Bank that had potentially been underpaid and the bank could end up paying $660,000 for the breach. I tried to do it on my phone. Sean kind of did it in his head. I did it on my phone. I got an E for error, I assumed it was. Anyway, Danuka says that it actually means to the power of 10. So all I needed to do, as another listener pointed out, Dean got in touch via Instagram and said, Michael, turn your phone to landscape when your calculator can't fit numbers on the screen and it becomes a scientific calculator. So I learned so much. So between Dean and Danuka, who have both gotten in touch in the last 24 hours to just point out basically how I should be using my phone or how I should be using a calculator, I feel like that's a joint Mia for the day.
Oh, that's brilliant. What great tips.
Yeah, it is fantastic. All right. Thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Friday, the 21st of April, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Twitter, and Facebook as well. And stay up to date on all the business news with Alexa and your Amazon Echo smart speaker. Simply say, Alexa, play the Fear and Greed podcast to catch the latest episode. And you can grab yours now at amazon.com.au. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.